Hi everyone, it's Jerry. I have an instructive game to share with you from the final match of the 2025 FIDE World Cup. This was played November 26th on the white end Javokhir Sindarov, playing against Wei Yi. Alright, this was game 1 of 2 from tiebreak 1. Time controls 15 minutes each with a 10-second increment. My primary focus will be on this game's endgame. Very instructive endgame. Very instructive blunder made in this one. Opening wise, we have a Queen's Gambit declined, and with Bishop B4, Ragozin Defense. 2 pins now present. Absolute, relative, relative 1 quickly resolved. Let's get a few more healthy moves in. Okay, dark square bishop now questioned. This pin now resolved. Queen recapturing. There's a break nearby for black in e5. Queen has a role in holding that break up. c6. And from here, a4 is played. Now, why the delay with this light square bishop? White is saying, okay, I understand. If I move my bishop now, then you're going to take on c4, and I have to take a second step to recapture. So let me try and squeeze a little bit more out of this position. In this case, white's going with a4. A little space on the queen side, if allowed. a5. In this case, it is allowed. Black continues here with rook e8. Perfectly healthy move here for black is to stop this pawn cold. Insert a5. Nothing wrong with this. In general, good news. Light square bishops, fixing a pawn on light, clamping down on a hole. Not black's path. Simply supports, carries on with this central break idea. Rook e8 it is. a5, still no light square bishop move, and now action in the center. Let's see how this resolves. D takes e, knight takes e, c takes d. Before going for this line, you have to weigh carefully the captures on f3. Now, how black plays it, he recaptures on d5. You could play in this way, as black, taking twice on f3, targeting the rook in the end. There's now a mate threat, calls this position about equal. There's some crazy lines here where there can be a sacrifice on e3. Okay, not the path in this game. No capture on f3. We have c takes d5, isolated pawn for black. Knight takes, queen takes. Queens are off in this endgame. E pawn pinned, no queens on board. King could play an active role. King d2 it is. Pop quiz. How would you respond here? Pause the video if you'd like. Okay, this isolated pawn frequently will show up as a liability. This is black's moment to get rid of it. Plays the top move, d4. E takes d. Rook takes a. Now it's white who's playing with an isolated pawn. It's passed, but it's not going anywhere fast. Follow-up is rook c5. So I found this move interesting. It's a very good move. A move that's also attractive. Frequently see this, a rook on the 7th rank. Why is the rook not going there? Let me draw some attention to this post. Rook on the 7th, you're looking next. Bishop c4, you try to converge, hang on, it's black's move. This is irritating. You're in a pin, and there isn't an easy way to wiggle out of it. So for instance, g3, with this idea of bishop g2 next, there's rook b1. Very disruptive move. How are you handling the pressure on b2? King c3, forget about it. Got a skewer. And if king c2, you're lost, because the bishop can safely play to f5. Check. Rook is covered. And you're in big trouble here. King b3, there's bishop e4. Now you're in a pin. Calling for bishop c6 here. You could even go for the exchange. That too will be winning. My point, this maneuver right here for black This rook gets excited about the 7th rank. Rook A1 to B1. Disruptive. How are things different with the move in the game? Rook C5? Well, first of all, Black's response is to exchange rooks. We no longer work with an isolated pawn. How are things different if Rook A1 with the rook on C5 instead of C7? Well, now you can safely play G3 with this idea. And in the case of Rook B1 here, there is King C2. Bishop F5, no good. Okay, so we're not only challenging the rook, but cutting out a variation connected with Bishop F5. Slick. Now, if Rook A2 here, no problem, King C3. All right, Rook A4, Bishop C4, development, cut off the pressure there on D4. Black goes for rook exchange. No isolated pawn anymore. Let's get a few more developing moves in here. Safeguard our pawns. Activate the rook. C5 defended. Undermined with A5. B takes A, rook takes C, rook C1. And from here we see the other rook exchange. Don't take the pawn. Got checkmate in 1. Flight square covered. So a same color bishop ending remains equal. A quick race here towards the center, the usual approach in these endgames, and in the end, white is just a hair better placed with the king. 4th rank king versus a 3rd rank king. F6. The time remaining for each, white has about 7 minutes to black's 2. Follow up H4. Pop quiz, how would you respond here? Pause the video if you'd like. Okay, position remains level. However, with black's next move, it's losing. Black here plays G5. Now we're going to see why this is losing soon enough. What would be better is to keep this exact arrangement. I believe a train of thought here is, okay, see no harm in planting another pawn on a dark square. Let me maybe control a dark square that's somewhat close to the king. Pawns do a good job controlling dark. Bishop's got the light. There's an issue with this. Now, what would be better is pretty much any bishop move that doesn't just lose the bishop right away. So, for instance, bishop b3. It's not a problem to allow this bishop to target the pawn. It says you're fine demoting your king in this case. e5 under control, d5 under control. Looks like white is gaining a lot of ground with king c5 here. 5th rank versus 2nd rank king now, but there isn't further progress that can be made. Black has all of the key squares covered here. Can't make further progress. So this would have been one example of a better move in this position, but how it is played here, we see g5. Pop quiz, how would you respond? Pause the video if you'd like. Okay, in the game h5 is played. This is not the winning way. We'll see how black handles that. It remains level after h5. This is the only winning move. Bishop e4. This will pull us into a 1 king and pawn ending for white. Now, how to respond to this? If the bishop backs off to c6, h5 is strong. Eventually, we will have a light square bishop exchange, and by having a pawn on h5, the pawn is just 3 steps away once you remove that h6 pawn. So these race positions where the king hunts the pawn like that, it's going to be a win for white. These king and pawn endings frequently come down to opposition, pawn races, tempi. What would be the story if black initiates the exchange on e4? Let's examine this king and pawn ending. Now, note, going for this line here, white should not have some concern of losing this pawn. If black responds with this capture, Black is up a pawn, but it's really an imaginary pawn plus. The G pawn negates 2 H pawns. White would be able to make inroads, king f5 here. If the f pawn is defended, the king invades, ends up swiping the h pawn soon enough. If king d5 here, this line right here, you have to be a little accurate. Advancing the pawn in this position is a draw. So just mapping out the moves, it ends up that both sides queen. The winning way, however, would be with king f5, king g4, and then track the h4 pawn, and you are now ready to fly with the f pawn. So at my point, you shouldn't be concerned as white if black is swiping the h4 pawn. We're going to test out 2 key decisions at this stage for the king. One is to box out the king, take opposition, and the other is to just go hunting for the pawn race position, king c5, b5, a5. Let's test that one out first. If king c5, another pop quiz, what would be your move here? Pause the video if you'd like. Okay, the winning way is to ensure that this pawn lives. You play h5, and what's going to happen, both sides will end up queening. This position, you want to make sure you stay off of the light square diagonal. Don't want black to promote with check, so king here. And in the end, black promotes first. However, this king is out of play. The relevant side of the board is the king side. It's the white king that's far more active. We'll be collecting pawns soon from here. Just have to be a little careful. A little check, don't take. Queen b2, you'll be losing the queen. Check, king here. This is considered a one queen ending for white with the far better king position. Okay, some lengthy lines here for sure. King and pawn endings. So that's how things would play out if the king goes hunting for the a pawn. Now, let's examine this opposition approach. King e6. Another pop quiz. What is your move? Pause the video if you'd like. Okay, the only winning way would be with h5. And now what? If the king moves, the white king enters, and that's going to be lost for black. So king f7, king f5. You don't even need this pawn around to act as a tempo pawn, just sort of passing so you can make inroads. You're going to make inroads next. So let's say black says, okay, I'm going to keep you out of that f5 square. I'll give you a check. King d4. Now the king is ready to approach in this direction, or even just get on the same rank as these pawns. Let's say black takes opposition. Another pop quiz. What is your move? Pause the video if you'd like. Okay, there is value in having this pawn still in home base. You have the option to go 1 or 2. In this case, 1 is the winner. And now what? Back to black's move here. What do you do with the king? King c6, king e5, king e6, king c5. You're making inroads one way or another. Final thing to test out. Pawn advances. In both cases, you capture the pawn. f4, take, take. King e4, pick up the pawn and then fly. Testing out the other pawn. Take, approach. Things are a little different. If black goes after this pawn, you don't go after this one. You go after the h6 pawn. And this is a very cool line. Stay off of this diagonal with check. So king here is cool. And in the end, what's happening with this pawn race? Both sides queen, but there's a problem. Check, follow up, skewer, queen is dead. Okay. How it ended up playing out in this game, very deep stuff here, kicking off with bishop e4. How it played out after g5, we had h5. This is now level. Bishop pinpoints the h-pawn. g4, bishop e6, bishop e4, b-pawn covered. King is demoted, but all the important squares are covered here. Bishop coordinated well with the pawn. King c5, bishop d7, bishop c8. Not really making any progress. Black staying trained on this e6 square, not allowing entry. And eventually we see a king and pawn ending, but the thing is that there are no tempi remaining for white with the pawns. And black currently has opposition. Play follows with king e4, king e6, opposition yet again. f4, pop quiz, what is your move here? Pause the video if you'd like. Only one move keeps this level and black plays it. Captures on f4. If you don't play in this way, you're lost. So, an example, king e7, white takes on g5, and then takes opposition, and will be improving further from here. One king and pawn ending for white. Okay. In this game, we meet f4 with g takes f4, king takes f4. Final test here, final pop quiz. What is your move? Pause the video if you'd like. Okay, no tempi left in the pawns. The only move is with king e7. This king is going to be able to play to f5 next, and you want to just make sure you can respond to that by playing your king to f7, taking opposition. King e7 is the way to do it. King f5, king f7, there you go. If you play king f7 here, this is now losing. The king makes inroads next. Something like this. F-pawn will be won next. Okay, the drawing way is with king e7, king e3, king e6, little king shuffle, and after king f5, the players agree to a draw. The game continued. We just see this. The king has to back off, and we're just repeating moves. So no more testing out at this stage. Very instructive endgame here. Seeing this blunder, top 10 player going with g5. Better to simply sit here, keep this pawn back. Don't allow this idea of h5, this pawn to be vulnerable, tracked. All a timing game with this king and pawn ending. Anyhow, your thoughts with this one, feel free as usual to leave any feedback to this video in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed it and maybe took a thing or two away. That's all for now. Take care.